of public service. I know I can't begin to describe it, and currently visiting faculty at Cornell, NYU, God knows where else, very much travelling. And Ayesha, who I've known for some time, is currently based at my institution at SOAS, which is a wonderful development for us. But having studied here at King's College herself, where she took her PhD in war service, has worked with all sorts of military projects since, including with the Pakistan Navy, which sounds fascinating to me. And just a family mention, working with my husband, I believe, on a book. So, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome very warmly here to tonight's discussion, Rethinking Pakistan. And we have till 6 o'clock, and we like 10-15 minutes for questions, would be lovely. Welcome.
So we'll let Ayesha and Raza speak, but in between, actually, if you have a burning question that you think actually...
I do. Why do you have a shawl right now? Is it part of the theme?
Sorry?
The shawl.
Yes, it could be. It could be. So yeah, just butt in. I always think, we're in England, pretend this is like a pub or kitchen table, so we can all sort of butt in and have a good time. So, as you've already had introductions, but let me flash the book, because that's very important, I think. So this is what we're going to be discussing. It's Rethinking Pakistan, a 21st Century Perspective. And Raza Rumi teaches at Cornell University. He's also the director at the Park Centre for Independent Media. And Ayesha Siddiqa, who has contributed to this book. She's also an author and a research associate at SOAS University here in London, and also a graduate at King's. So thank you both for taking part. So we've only got till 6 o'clock, but so what we're actually going to do is focus on really two key areas, we thought, for this discussion. And I suppose the way I tend to talk is really the two sexy bits in the book for me, is really looking at sort of foreign policy, the relationship between India and Pakistan. That's something we're all probably interested in, certainly something Khushwant Singh was very interested in. And I suppose you can't talk about Pakistan and not really talk about civil-military relationships. So those are sort of the two areas that we're going to focus on. But again, if you've got something else that you do want to discuss or put a question, we'll see if somebody can answer it. But Raza, let me start off with you first of all. Just give us an overview, I suppose, of this book. Why do we need yet another academic book about Pakistan? Why is it important?
Okay. Well, well, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this, and it's a great opportunity because we were launching this book since past few days, and here comes another opportunity to promote the book, so it's always welcome. The book is a disparate collection of 20 or more essays, and obviously your question is quite valid. Why another book? It's part scholarly, it's part popular writing. So in that sense, it's a sort of mix of different genres. The distinctive feature of this book is that unlike a lot of material that has come out on Pakistan, which is largely authored by either academics abroad or by foreign journalists, they do their books or long-form reporting, etc. This is a book which contains essays and perspectives from people who are based in Pakistan, or whom and I do apologize to use this rather controversial word, somewhat native to their land. so it is that particular voice which also kind of testifies to the larger robustness of Pakistani society, where despite severe structural constraints, repression on freedom of speech and thinking, there are people who are researching and writing and speaking up and coming up with new perspectives, given that Pakistan is and has entered the 21st century as a very different country than it was, let's say, 30-40 years ago. First of all, Pakistan's demographic transformation in the past few decades has been rather dramatic, because it is a country where the median age now is 23.5 or 24 years old. So it's a very young country, perhaps the youngest in South Asia. And more, only India and Bangladesh are catching up sort of in terms of that demographic positioning. The second important feature of today's Pakistan is that it is also becoming rapidly urbanized. So all thinking on Pakistan earlier assumed that it was largely people living in villages and rural areas, and only 1/3 lived in urban centers. It's the other way around now. In the Punjab province, which is the largest province of Pakistan, which has 56% of the population, total of 210 million or so, 70% or so population lives in urban conditions. They may not be organized towns and cities, but it is a kind of a different kind of a Pakistan that we are looking at. And the third important feature in Pakistan has been that, for the first time in its history, there have been two democratic transitions. It's a third civilian government which has been elected into office. The project of democracy in Pakistan faces severe challenges, where still it's a very weak fledgling civilian institutions and, the larger overarching role of the military. But it is a very first that we've had, 3 transitions in quick succession. It has never been the case, because in Pakistan, no civilian government prior to, let's say, a decade ago had ever transferred power to another civilian government.
So from 2008 to 2018,
yes,
it's basically been this one civilian government.
Yes, 3. It's the third one, and we've had 3. We've had 3 elections in quick succession. So, I'm highlighting some of these challenges, and then we also know that Pakistan and South Asia in general, the Indian subcontinent, climate change is one of the greatest threats that we face as a region. Both India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are the 3 countries which have been declared as most vulnerable to the changing weather patterns, to global warming, to the larger, threat of climate change, and whether they are adapting enough, and they cannot do it on their own. They have to cooperate with each other, because the rivers and the environmental factors are shared, and each country has an impact on the other. So, given all of this book tries to bring in perspectives on some of these key themes. And, of course, the first one being, which I'm sure all of you are familiar, is the whole question of identity in Pakistan, which is an unresolved matter, whether Pakistan is supposed to be an Islamic state, is it supposed to be a hybrid theocracy, is it supposed to be a theocracy, is it supposed to be a secular state? It's an open debate. Any Pakistani you'll meet 5 of them, and they're all 5 different imaginations of Pakistan. Very much the case what it was, say, in 1947 or prior to that different groups and different communities of Muslims within United India thought of Pakistan as a different kind of a country, and that struggle continues even in the 21st century. And secondly, the book also explores, the much cited and much reported issue of radicalization of Pakistanis society over the last 4 decades or so, particularly not just through the education system that we have, the curricula we teach to our kids, but also through the peculiar geostrategic location of Pakistan, which has made it follow a particular brand of foreign policy, where you have to, you support the Taliban because they're your best allies in Afghanistan, and that has a cost on Pakistani society. And Pakistan has gone through that particular, terrible phase of facing extreme violence in all parts of the country. Nearly 70,000 Pakistani civilians and officials have died in the last 15, 16 years across the length and breadth of the country. Earlier it used to be concentrated near Afghanistan, but not so later, where terrorism was a common occurrence. And then there's been a reaction and response to that challenge by the Pakistani state, the military, but also the civilian politicians, the society, and others, and they have had made an effort in the past few years to somehow deal with that. How successful or unsuccessful they are, that's a question I leave to Ayesha, who knows that better than I do. But this book goes into some depth exploring that, and then finally it looks at the challenges of water, climate change, the environmental future of Pakistan, and how should we be thinking about that in the next few decades. So it's organized around these 5 or 6 broad themes and brings in some of the perspectives. And what we've tried to do, I came in a bit late as the co-editor, but my idea was to kind of move, give it a bit of a prescriptive or policy angle as to, problem identification was not enough. Let's also think what could be done given the constraints that face the country. So I'll end there, maybe we can have more Q&A session.
Of course. And so let's carry on then, really. One of the things you've talked about is civilian government, and of course we have a civilian government at the moment in power with Imran Khan. But before he was even sworn in, there was the usual mutterings, and I remember reading in the British press saying that yes, he might now have won, but actually the real power still lies with the army in Pakistan. Is that too simplistic, or is that really the case? Is that how it's playing out?
Well, firstly, I'm immensely thankful to the organisers for inviting me along with Prasad. To come to the question, it's a difficult question. It's like it's very challenging to answer that. It may seem simplistic, but it's also an issue of reality. And there are structural issues with Pakistan's politics, and one being that the military has over years become the most powerful institution. Of course, it's not the only one which is there. It tends to build partnerships with others, with the civil democracy. The one difference between, for instance, between India and Pakistan, there is that while the civil bureaucracy in India has been historically very powerful, Pakistan's civil bureaucracy has always worked in the shadow of the military bureaucracy. So my favorite example is that in India, for instance, if somebody suggested that let's go and weed out ghost schools, let's do the task to the military. In India, probably there will be the civil bureaucracy will snub the military and say, you don't know how to do it. We know how to do it. In Pakistan, on the other hand, the civil bureaucracy will use the military to renegotiate their cost, the price with the civilians, with the public, the general public. So, be it the judges, be it the civil society, in fact we were talking about that over years, the presence of the military has become so huge that there's no civil society left. They're all partners.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that then the army is almost in infiltrated is probably the wrong word, but infiltrated or is part of a lot of the structures now in Pakistan, so they're part of what? Media, education, what do you mean?
See, they're in media, every channel in order to survive. Because the model, the media model has always been in Pakistan extremely problematic. It depends a lot on the government for funding. And that's why the military came in and said, all right, that's how we'll push you back. So, be it the media, be it education, the military runs universities, it's an economic player, and I think the more latest, in fact, the latest noticeable development is that it's also a societal actor. From think tanks, and this is something which is happening in India as well, that you have policy decisions, policy debates, with military really in the center, and it's extremely dangerous, whoever does it, be it India or Pakistan.
So has it got worse, or has it always been quite detrimental? Because to me it sounds as though it's getting even more ingrained.
It is getting more ingrained, but I think part of the issue is that the military learns. I mean, unfortunately, over more than 70 years of Pakistan's existence, the one institution which has had a learning curve as an institution is the military, nobody else. So what has happened is that what they've realized is that, all right, let's look at the international trends. And the international trends are that, you get a pat on the back if you have continuous democracy, if you have elections, if you don't boot out governments, but then somebody vote them out. But then what to do is that you intervene somehow with the elections. I mean, look at the election of Imran Khan. There are serious questions that need to be asked about the 2018 elections. And it's interesting that one had expected him to at least be there and look like the boss for at least a couple of years before the axe fell and they would push him around. It has happened within months. It's within months that he's started to look like a puppet.
So why has it happened so quickly in his leadership?
It's uncomfortable. They expected him because what he had done was promise that huge economic change. Pakistan has money problems. I mean, it's a structural flaw of dependency on external sources of funding. So now there's suddenly things are drying up. There's China coming in, but with a different model. So they expect, the military expects, and what had happened also in the previous regimes of the PPP is the 18th Amendment to the 1973 Constitution, which gives power to autonomy, financial autonomy to provinces, which means that federal government has lesser reserves than it used to be, lesser money to give away to the military. So for financial concerns, there are negotiations happening in Afghanistan. They need to deal with more robust or seemingly more robust India. So for a number of reasons, they got very uncomfortable with a government and giving this government time to kind of sort out things and start doing the magic, which it couldn't.
So is it really as bad as all of that?
Well, I mean, it is pretty serious. But I would like to just add to the Imran Khan issue that the question that you raised, that, Imran Khan's rise, and his backing by the military, of course, played a big role in his getting into power. But there is a genuine, support for him in urban pockets within Pakistan, and that is linked to his kind of populism. The populist politics brand that he professes. And it's not too different from the global wave of populism that we are witnessing, which is like promise the moon, high rhetoric, unachievable stuff, So Imran Khan's large politics has been that I'm honest, I'm clean, everybody else is corrupt, and hence I will deliver a clean and incorruptible government. Now, if you actually look at the parallel in India, a lot of supporters of Mr. Modi also go for his incorruptible image, and the fact that Mr. Modi is a self-made politician, from a tea vendor or whatever, chai wala, whatever the translation is, that he's risen through the ranks and become a politician. He's not a Gandhi, he's not a dynastic politician, and that he has this aura of incorruptibility and some magic of a chidin. And never mind who supports Mr. Modi, his corporate backers, all the big companies that work with this party, and the concessions they get in the process, which have been reported by the Indian media. So Imran Khan pretty much plays onto the same theme. If you look at what Erdogan, the way he talks about himself in Turkey, fancies himself as a caliph, of the 21st century, and again he has this whole aura of religion mixed with piety and personal morality and incorruptibility. So Imran's whole deal has been that, but the reality is what Ayesha mentioned to you, the hard facts of Pakistani Pakistan's economy, its external payments prices, the role of the military is that, this rhetoric completely fell flat within the first few months, because yes, there was a quote-unquote honest leader elected and then installed as Prime Minister, but what can he or she do given the very strong structural constraints? And I think the second part of my response to Ayesha's overview is that in the last at least 3 decades, Pakistan's what I mentioned to you earlier about urbanization, and the growth of middle class in Pakistan, and the economic expansion in the services sector has created a new kind of groups within the urban Pakistan that are not very keen on a direct military rule. They are okay with the military playing a strong role because of the security constraints, but they also believe that direct military rule is either passé, and they'd rather have someone like Imran Khan or someone else, but rather than military general ruling the country. So that has also influenced the military's policy to take a relative backseat. I mean, they're still very much calling the shots, but they are letting civilians do the bidding rather than directly.
If I could butt in, I think this new middle class, by the way, owes its existence or its birth to the military itself.
General
Musharraf's tenure, the money that was coming in from outside, the new NGOs, the new professional class, the middle class, which came into being, very dependent. So I don't think that they themselves are maybe an issue. I think for the military itself, the challenges in the region are so much that it would like to, and the thing is that the pattern which had existed all along was 10 years of civil, 10 years of military, 10 years of civil, 10 years of military. And therefore, it had become predictable. And I think what they're doing is to become a little more unpredictable in the sense that, all right, if you think this is how we are, we have something else to give you.
So much more sophisticated now.
Much more sophisticated.
So you've got a civilian leader, as you said, you called him a puppet, but actually behind pulling all the strings is still the military. Let me just move on, because otherwise we will spend the next 45 minutes on this issue. But just how do you think the military are going to react to an even stronger Modi government?
Well, makes me extremely nervous. I mean, now we have the same kind of situation on both sides of the border. The military in Pakistan perhaps has kind of met its match on the other side. This is what the situation is. I mean, it's not going to be a very sophisticated response from the Indian side. And I think what is very clear from the language of the electorate in India is that a more robust response. I think that what has happened recently, very unfortunate, Pulwama and then Balaghat, very unnerving, because what it means really, Perminder, is that both sides thinking the same way, have taken their own calculations. And so there is going to be a next time, there's going to be another conflict, and there's going to be probably greater casualty, more bloodshed. So, to put it very simply, Pakistan's military for a long time, its issue has been with India at least that its imagination of parity, it talks in terms of equality. There is a lot of confusion between parity and equality. And therefore, there is a robust response. The issue of territorial, and I think my fear is that over years, The whole India-Pakistan conflict around the territory has blown up into a more ideological conflict or differences. And that's very hard to tackle. I think the only thing which may push back the military for a time is reorganizing resources and finances. That's the only thing which will stop.
There's a question.
Yes, go on, yes.
How nervous should you feel about the dependence that's bound to happen with China building the superhighway that's there for themselves?
How nervous should one feel? See, China, a country with resources, is a regional player, and the point is that, yeah, from an Indian perspective, it's something that it needs to think about it. But I think there could also be a way of China and India collaborating. Instead of having a confrontational relationship over the highway. Because let me tell you, that despite Pakistan's CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, being one of the very critical roots of the Belt Road Initiative, there's still a lot of weaknesses that have crept into it. It's a future project. I do not see CPEC or BRI as something which will materialize into something that big as China has imagined. It's much more difficult to plan. I think China itself is realizing that. It's struggling to, but it's realizing that there are issues. Let's not forget, there is the Saudi-Iran tension, which is happening, and if there is conflict that takes off between the United States, Saudi Arabia and Iran, then forget about BRI. So, and there are many other things which Pakistan itself has gotten slow. This civil military tension itself is something which slows down the process. But I think conceptually, BRI is one of the initiatives. There could be other initiatives. And a cooperative mechanism can start. I think looking at things purely from a military perspective, there's something seriously wrong with it. Be it India or be it Pakistan or some other country, I think they should look at the economic benefits that they can draw from it. I'd always believe very strongly that Pakistan and India could have been great partners. So why not China and India, and why not Pakistan and India? We need to look at economic partnerships.
Ayesha, that's a really interesting point that you've just raised there, saying that India and Pakistan could have been great partners. So let's go on and just explore that a little bit. Does that ever happen?
I'm a committed peacenik, but the thing is that what Ayesha said, the immediate term or in the short to medium term, I think it's just going to be more conflict, heated rhetoric on both sides, and unless of course, because you see, in Pakistan there's a whole group of people who think that BJP is actually good for peace prospects because of the past experience under Mr. Vajpayee, when he made sort of historic initiatives both with Nawaz Sharif and Musharraf in securing peace. Of course, that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. So when Mr. Modi won the election last time round, there was a particular group of people who said, well, good, we can actually, because Nawaz Sharif was still the Prime Minister in Pakistan, maybe there's going to be a Vajpayee 2.0. It did not happen, sadly, for reasons both domestic in Pakistan and to some degree in India as well. And I think, unfortunately, with the heightened rhetoric and particularly this whole Pulwama incident and the way election campaign was run and mobilized in India, which took a very where Mr. Modi touted himself as the chowkidar or the guardian or whatever, security guard of India, and everybody, every follower of his on Twitter had Chokidar, X, Y, Z, I'm Chokidar, he's Chokidar, and there was this Chokidar imagination. It's also a very colonial construct, by the way, because if you look at this CRPC, the criminal laws set in by the British, that's where the whole Chokidari system emerges. So, we are in India and Pakistan. This is my long-held argument that our decolonization project is a lapsed one, and this whole construction of communal identities, whether it is the Hindu, who is a Hindu, who is not a Hindu, who is a Muslim, who is not a Muslim, how do you identify? The British started this census in 1861. I mean, prior to that, there was no recorded understanding, and people had local and regional identities which were more paramount, and rather than singular, homogenized Hindu or Muslim, because even within Muslims you have so much diversity that you can't really, you have 5 of them in a room and they'll be all talking and praying differently, for example. So this homogenization of identities and the whole espousal of the idea of nationalism, which led to so much violence in Europe, Western Europe, and the 2 world wars. I mean, we really have to think beyond that. Who's going to think that? I don't know. Given the circumstances, it's not likely. But the move towards a Hindu nationalist imagination of India is just it mirrors the already set into place Pakistan Islamic nationalism project. So India is just late to the party. Welcome to the party, some of those who are from there. And this particular divergence, I think, if you start defining your national identities in religious terms, in communal terms, and then it is exactly what Ayesha says, that the enters into the ideological fold. I mean, it's much more than territory or Kashmir or military. There's this whole ideological basis then. And in Pakistan, Mr. Modi's re-election and the first election has been a great booster for Pakistani hyper-nationalists. I think, see, Mr. Jinnah was right. That is why we need a separate country. Thank you. When Modi won the election, there was a hashtag in Pakistani blogosphere and social media. Thank you, Mr. Jinnah. And whether that's historically correct or incorrect, that's a separate issue. But that's how popular imaginations work, and it's not a great time for that peace building. There's a handful.
Yes, and there's one here as well. So let's take
How concerned are you, Pakistan defaulting on Chinese loan, especially in view of the fact that Guadra is not going to produce the revenues that projected on, and also looking at the consideration what has happened in Africa and in Sri Lanka when they couldn't pay the loan?
Well, I mean, there are some concerns, but as you know, Pakistan has just signed an agreement with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout, and the Saudis and the other Gulf states have also put in some cash into Pakistani's reserves. So there's no immediate fear of a default. Those are mainly exaggerated media reports. Yes, there is the larger concern which was highlighted by the earlier participant. What is the role, future long-term role of China in Pakistan, whether it's through the economic corridor, whether it's through the money, because you see, as we know from our history of the subcontinent, companies and corporations do come and they bring in ideas too. They bring in systems. They bring in politics. So that is something that there is a debate within Pakistan going on as to where would it all lead to. So I don't think there's a big risk of that, and also given Pakistan's geostrategic location, it is both a advantage and a curse. Curse because I mentioned earlier, but advantage because now the US wants to exit from Afghanistan. Earlier it wanted to fight a war in Afghanistan. Before that it wanted to expel the Soviets. Now it wants to get out, and it needs Pakistan. So they will not the default. In short.
Just a minute. See, I think there is some rethink in Pakistan taking place and in different sectors, in which the question is how do you deal with the Chinese? Within the larger establishment, which includes the military, there is a rethink of you're not going to let them in and everywhere. There is some learning, reason to
This is a very recent in Imran Khan's
Sorry?
But the projection of the Guadra is not going to produce
No,
as much as revenue as it was.
That's not the issue. The thing is that they are in different areas. There is a rethink on how far you let the Chinese in, and I'm especially in reference to, for example, mining in Balochistan. And instead of opening up the gates and allowing China to kind of come and take all the contracts, now the thing is that they don't want that to happen.
Let's move on.
Oh,
Next
yes,
question there,
yes.
yes.
Jinnah was mentioned a little bit earlier. Pakistan today appears to be a very different place to that which was envisaged by Jinnah prior to the birth of Pakistan. To what degree is that as a consequence of the, putting it generously, the stewardship of Mr. Ziaul-Haq in those years when Pakistan seems to have moved towards a theocratic state?
Do you want me to?
I will
Okay.
pitch in.
Okay, so I mean, this whole, well, that's the whole problem, because in Pakistan, those who always wanted an Islamic state or a system cite some of the quotes and speeches of Mr. Jinnah, and they say, see, he talked about Muslims and Islam, so we should have a theocracy. There are other progressives, people like me, who say, well, he made a speech on the 11th of August saying you're free to go to your temples and free to go to your mosques, and the state has nothing to do with your religion. So there are as many imaginations of Jinnah as there have been for Pakistan. And what did he really want? We really don't know, but we do know from his earlier pronouncements as head of the state that he did not want the kind of country that Ziaul-Haq framed in the 1980s. And how did Ziaul-Haq do that? He did not do it on his own. I mean, Ziaul-Haq had the backing of international community at that time because of the war in Afghanistan. And the world looked the other way for whatever he was doing, whether he was repressive and changing the laws of evidence and the constitution, etc. And in fact, there has been some sort of reversal as well, because General Musharraf tried to undo some of the very harsh discriminatory laws against women. And later on, there have been legislative interventions to undo some of the discriminatory features in the legal system against minorities. But the impact has been so huge because that was a transformational decade where not just the legal structure, but the social structures were changed. And going back to my earlier point about the Hindu nationalist project of BJP and its ideological basis, is that that is the problem, because once you start opening up the gates for religious identity to influence governance, there's no end. Because then how many laws do you change? How many constitutions do you change? How do you select judges? How do you select parliamentarians? I mean, for example, General Zia inserted this clause in Pakistani constitution that you have to be Sadiq and Amin, which is Arabic for truthful and, I don't know what, honest, to be a parliamentarian. Now, what is being truthful? What is being honest? It's all a way up for grabs. So the Nawaz Sharif was disqualified 2 years ago because the establishment wanted him out on the basis of these clauses. They said, well, you did not declare the salary that your son had to give you, which he never took, and hence you were not being honest. You were disqualified. So it's a very open-ended colonial tactic to shift around politics, and that's what I'll just conclude with this point that I want to talk about the common issues here as well, because taking advantage that some of the most of you are from India or have some link there, is the fact that this whole colonial state apparatus that we have inherited. I mean, for example, the police order 1861. I mean, why on earth is it still in place in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh? I mean, it is a colonial coercive police instrument designed 160 years ago for an extractive state, it still runs our police systems. The civil services, for example, the Land Revenue Administration, the Land Acquisition Act, you name it, the civil code, the criminal code, I mean, the way high courts work, the way judges function, their case laws, their rules, their appointments, I mean, it is so passé and out of sync with the 21st century. That to me is a bigger challenge, and a lot of these anxieties that we are going through is this toxic mix of this whole colonial state with a globalization and neoliberal tide which has held its way in the last 2-3 decades, in the past 3 decades, and it is creating a toxic mixture of this sort of neoliberal ascendancy articulating through a colonial state. I mean, people getting picked up to write anti-Modi, anti-Hasina Wajid, anti-army posts on Facebook. There are people languishing in jails just because they wrote critical comments about Hasina Wajid and her father, or Imran Khan, or the Pakistani military, or Modi ji in India. Pakad ke jail mein dal diya. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, and this whole idea of anti-national. Who's the national, in Pakistan we call them traitors and Ghaddar or whatever. In India it's anti-national. In Bangladesh it's also anti-national. Every person who opposes Hasina Wajid is somehow anti-national. As if the state has the complete monopoly of giving the certificates of patriotism and loyalty to the state and the country. And I think that is it is steeped in the language is so colonial. To me, that is the worry. So Mr. Modi's rise and some of the antics, that some of his supporters do, whether lynchings or the JNU thing, where dissenting students are anti-national. I mean, students are studying for Pete's sake. I mean, how can they even have a national or an anti-national identity? And the same in Pakistan, the same in Bangladesh. I think there's a common theme here. We have to really think as a region on how far just getting independence and having separate constitutions and territorial borders is not enough, because our decolonization is truly lapsed. And truly, I mean, General Zia's 80s decades, ironically and in a very perverse way, was a move towards some kind of decolonization.
Even before that, even before Zia, when it comes to Pakistan, let's not forget that the Islamization of the state was started by Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It was the first time he actually declares enemies as non-Muslims. The state takes upon itself the responsibility of declaring who's a Muslim or who's not. I would say that, perhaps like any good upper middle class, educated, urban person today in either Delhi or Islamabad or anywhere else, who's as confused about religion. I mean, this is what Jinnah probably was. I mean, what do? You create a country in the name of an identity. Yet, what you then do, how do you define that identity? That's a question. And for him, it was, I'm working on a book, and for that, I've been looking at some archives, documents, and it's very interesting. I mean, before he died, he even communicated with Hassan al-Banna, the head of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, asking him, requesting him, to come and help, send experts to help Pakistan become a Muslim state. Now, I think in his imagination, and what he explained in that letter was a country which would be more, anti-colonial. For him, Muslim identity was anti-colonial. He didn't think much deeply about how would you define religion, who will be able to define it. And like anywhere else in South Asia, the elite, the ruling elite that became that created, these countries, or were part of the nation building process, could, very simply ignore religion. But religion was part of the local identity. And over years, religion has been used, brought back in different ways in different countries. And now the thing is that the genie is really out of, not just out of the bottle, it's out of control too. And anywhere, and I think Pakistan's experience is that, which others need to learn from also, is that anytime and anywhere religion is used and brought into politics, it's going to be such a difficult challenge for the future with nobody, which nobody would know how to deal with.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it. Ayesha, thank you very much. I think a lot of that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you everyone. It's been a long day, but it actually hasn't felt like one. I'm feeling, normally at this time I really want to go. I would actually love to carry on, it's been so much fun. But I'm afraid we're going to have to wait till 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. There'll be tea served before that, but the first talks will start at 11. The books are still on sale now if you want to pick some up leaving. And speakers I know are gathering together again shortly. So I hope you'll go away tonight having taken a lot from today and come back tomorrow for more liveliness. There's some fabulous talks tomorrow that I'm really looking forward to, particularly the poetry session and of course the film session. So I think we've covered so many aspects of culture. Thank you to all our speakers today. Again, I don't know how they did it, but they've done it. I look forward to seeing you all.